everybody. Here we go, another session in play. Let's take off. Alright, 11:03 p.m. Eastern, coming at you with a beautiful Luna. I think it's like 78% illuminated tonight. A waxing gibbous just cleared up for me here in Central Florida. Humid AF and dealing with a lot of heat. I know everyone is too, but can't complain. Things are gorgeous now. Time for liftoff. Been studying all day long, reading comments, watching videos, wanting to continue our chat from yesterday. Try and keep it make it a little bit more concise tonight, a little more clear. Yesterday I just had a million things to say, so I got off a bit quick on it. But let me know if you can hear me okay. Make sure you have that 4K set. Hopping in here to say what's up to my fam, my space fam, Whimsical Renegade, Morgan, Rum Vorax, what's going on, Miguel. Nice to see y'all. Yeah, so we got Tycho Crater looking amazing with some sharp detail. You got the two trails coming out of it, out the bottom, that 6 o'clock position, up at Borealis, cutting into one of those trails on the right, moving right into Mare Imbrium. We got Copernicus, the larger visible tonight, largest crater visible tonight, I think. And let's see what else. The Apennine mountain range. We got Eratosthenes. You got, is that Kepler? Basically, Aristarchus coming up under the Terminator line. On the right-hand side, Mare Crisium, Proclus, Serenity, Tranquility, Fecunditatis. Looking really sharp. and nice. What's going on, Lost Brooklyn? Alright. Moving up a little bit, you can see Sinus Iridum has some amazing detail at the top of Mare Imbrium, and Plato Crater as well. Let's wait for some people to come in, and I'll do a little bit of a Zoom tour tonight, and some tunes while our friends show up. Dagger Spells, evening, much love. NGC, hello Spacelings. Meow. Good to see you all. Got lots to say. Thanks for all the comments from yesterday's video. And if you have any other thoughts on it, let me know. We're going to talk about field theory. I made a couple of, not animations, but graphics that I'll share. And as well, I kind of caught up on this other channel that I've talked about it in the past. It was called a dyslexic artist's theory of everything, or a theory on everything. And he talks about the whole frame of reference and the idea that time is actually created by every particle and every human and every creature in the universe, large and small, creating its own time and having its own frame of reference. And I find it really interesting because it's one of these things that I definitely feel is true, but sometimes you kind of forget the details of these ideas. And what he was talking about in terms of how time is actually literally created by a dipole moment between a photon and an electron. And within those dipole moments, which I've called foci, or wave interference, those moments are what we perceive as not only our conscious reality, but each of those foci has its own time, its own gravity, its own frame of reference. And it's really a wonderful continuity of the thinking of field theory. And also he talks about Heisenberg and Einstein in a way that actually is coherent. So I'll link that video at some point. I see Fiber Oats in the channel. I see Shockwave. What's going on? Volume is a little low. Let me see what's going on here. I thought I had it okay, but I just don't want it to clip too much, because clipping is worse than being low. But maybe testing. I think that'll have to do. I don't know why the volume control on it is not working. It's weird. Gravity fields, electric fields that are much... Wait, Shockwave says, gravity fields, electric fields that are much stronger than gravity and magnetic fields. That's the universe. Throw me some more detail there, friend. I mean, really what I was just trying to say, and what I have been saying, is really this idea of recursive geometry at every scale. And at every scale, every point has its own gravity well, its own time, its own frame of reference. And so as a human, you have a field, and as a quantum unit, you have a field. And this field is organized based on the geometry that we've talked about, the torus and the hourglass. And I'll bring up I've like jumped right into this, but give me a second. We'll do this slow tonight. Doesn't have to go right into it. I also want to show some moon before I completely take off on a rant here. Line up some questions for me, please. I'd like to try and respond to everybody. I know that some people leave questions, and I was reading the chat from yesterday and realized that I'd skipped over a bunch of stuff. So first of all, forgive me if I ever skip over anybody. And two, if you want to ask me a question, feel free to ask it again, and or engage me. It doesn't have to just be a question. Engage me, please. All right, let's see. Maybe it's better like that. I can see the meter, and it somehow like is not being affected by the volume knob for some reason. Even if should I blast it? Let's see. That's not changing anything at all. It's so weird. Not sure what's up with this mic. It's always finicky. Is this the gain? Maybe that's what it is. All right, let me try and do this. Add a tiny bit of gain here. Testing, 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 testing. I don't know. It's not really changing anything, y'all. So if you can't hear me say something, I'll repeat it. No problem. So let's get in here. I see Eric Jorgensen. Congrats on getting a job at a plasma laboratory. Is that what you said? Let's see. Got a job at a plasma research company. They have a new plasma torch design that uses an aluminum ceramic ring that's normally an insulator, a dielectric resonator. Creates a toroidal plasma donut in the middle of it when it's running. Super cool. Let's see. Wow. Okay, that's a lot going on in the chat here. So let me do this little moon tour here so we can respect our Luna, and also I've been missing it. It's been a while since we've done a nice, like, detailed close-up shot. So let's check out Copernicus crater coming in here. I did some research today. I did a lot of research today, but I kind of dove back into some moon stuff today. So I was looking up all the missions to the moon that have occurred. All the Russian missions, all the American missions, and basically every single possible rover, manned mission, and failed mission. And very interesting stuff, really, because you see this kind of the so-called race between the Soviet Union and the United States racing to send a manned craft to the moon. But what still stood out to me, which always does stand out to me, is the fact that no one ever, beyond Apollo, ever got men on the moon. Even though there were all these different Soviet missions that came very, very close. And then all of a sudden, just everybody else stopped trying because the United States made it. So you could take this in a lot of different ways. I've saw all the different comments, and the comment sections are very intense, and it's partially why I sometimes get away from the entire space for a while, because it's very difficult to sit and try and understand why people get so adamantly stubborn about things instead of just allowing new ideas to come into play. So I think so not only is it that the United States made it, apparently put men on the moon, which, again, not trying to say like I know for sure what happened, but let's say men on the moon, everybody giving up is actually suspicious. I mean, and or just kind of, it's just a strange phenomenon. It's one of those things where since somebody won a race, for example, then no one would try, or somebody made the most money on a record, therefore no one makes another record. But the comment sections would pose it as, what was the point? There is no point in ever trying again. That's why no other country has ever been able to get a manned moon mission. So I find that, just going to say it out loud, which is, it's more weird that no one tried it. And it's actually more, it's rational to actually question that, even if the answer is money, right? So second point is the money thing. And we're talking, and then I looked into the numbers, the defense budget, the NASA budget, inflation, trying to figure out like this idea about, okay, how much did it really cost? And the idea of things getting cheaper and easier over time. And then I looked into the how much the defense budget is today, which is upwards of $500 billion, and NASA budget, which is $25 billion. And roughly from the 60s till now, it's about tenfold what it was. So NASA at the time had a $5 billion budget in '69, and the defense budget was roughly, I want to say, $50 billion. So there's this part, I know I'm going right into the moon stuff, but since we're looking at the moon, I was looking at, craters impact versus electric, and then of course I was looking at this budget and kind of the next moon missions and the planned moon missions and the older moon missions. And so if you're adjusting for inflation, it's roughly 25 billion to per year, I guess, in terms of what NASA was getting, and why this kind of excuse or this rationale of, they never did it again, or they didn't want to bother doing it because the will wasn't there and there was no money there. And the reason no other country has done it is the same reason, because there's no will and there's no money. Beyond the idea of, racing the United States to the moon. So looking at the list of the lunar missions, there was, of course, that, why no one else did it, and why there was such an intense, of course, people would say, oh, it's so obvious. There was the Cold War, and there's politics behind it. But if you really go into it, you start to realize, you can write it off as politics, but it's extreme science. People are like, it's not a scientific thing, but it is a scientific thing. It's physics and science and astronomy and all the other stuff. Yes, of course, it could be spurred by politics, but it really is still a scientific mission. So there's that part of it. Let's see. Is this something y'all want me to keep talking about, or I'm just going to wrap it up here with, I looked into electric versus impact theory, this idea that pretty much, I think, most of the features on the moon that we see were carved somehow by electrical arcing, where you had cosmic electric bolts, like static charge between a finger and a doorknob, go from planet to moon or Earth to the moon, and melt these craters and form these much sharper features that we see on the moon today, versus the idea of very scattered hundreds of thousands of meteorites crashing into the moon, but also then creating this very specific laser cut geometry. Not just the circular nature of them, but of course the hexagonal and octagonal and primitive geometry structure of them. Of course, and so when I looked into these videos again, it's what I do every year or so. I started doing it when I first did the channel, and if you type into YouTube or into anywhere in Google, you're like, laboratory experiments on crater formation. When you really consider that, men walked on the moon, and we live in this crazy reality where all these things exist, AI, computers, just everything exists, that when you type in this question into YouTube, you see extremely primitive examples, and examples that don't actually look like what we see on the moon. Of course, besides the electric universe plasma cosmology side of it. But I think it's really fascinating that we still, in 2022, if you look up laboratory crater formation or ballistic crater formation in a laboratory, 20, 30 videos, and then you get into random stuff. Most of them are either 5 to 10 years old. The majority of them are cake pan with flour and sand. And there's no actual video, just like one really high-end video of a ballistic crater formation impact in a laboratory, just one, with scientists and a paper, and it looking just like a feature on the moon. It just doesn't exist. It straight up doesn't exist. I think that's kind of fascinating. I see liminal in the chat. What's going on? What a fun word to say, plasma. Plasma. I see Jennifer NY13. What's happening? Welcome. So Shockwave's saying, if the U.S. had set up a base on the moon, I assume, then the Russians would have continued with their moon program. They saw the U.S. not set up a base, so they stopped, partly because the rockets sucked and blew up a lot. So, I mean, let's think about it. Think about that, because that's kind of what I'm saying. It's always kind of an ad hoc, almost excuse for why it never happened. But you don't give these excuses for any other technological achievement on Earth. And I'll give you a couple of examples, but saying hi to Jedi Princess. I'm like waving at you. Hi, good to see you, JP. Welcome, welcome. How's the city treating you? Is it scorching like it is here in the South? So So their rockets sucked. Okay, yeah, so when I was going through the list of lunar missions, yeah, a lot of rockets either crashed on Earth, exploded in orbit, or crashed into the moon, or ended up in solar orbit. So yes, rockets sucked and it was very difficult. However, Apollo was able to really nail this landing on the moon and bringing people back multiple times over. And not just that, nobody else could do it. And nobody else still can do it. And that's just, I think, weirder than anything. You could say any type of rationale for it, like politics or money, or it's just like saying somebody made the most money, therefore no one tried to make money again. Or somebody made the fastest car, therefore no one tried to make another car after that. That's what it sounds like to me. And like, it's not to make it a conspiracy, because like, I hate that idea of trying to find the fault in it. I just think it's actually kind of strange. It's just really, really strange to me. So there is that, but I'm going to try and gather some more of those resources. I'm getting some weird telescope response stuff. It's saying no response. It's weird. Dang. Okay. Glitching out. Alright, Mimsical Renegade says, the rich people privy to all the knowledge gained thought it better to spend the money going underground. So yeah, ultimately, I mean, there could be, look at that, it's going crazy. Hey, it stopped at Tycho automatically. Tycho and Clavius. So yeah, I mean, to me it seems like, yes, there might be a simpler answer where they stopped going and then they took it private, right? Every moon missions that we see publicly has a set of parameters, and then there are moon missions that are done privately that nobody really knows about. Another part of the going through all the different moon missions is that it links to all the different archive pages of these missions. Like the early ones, I'm talking about like 50 through 68, before they actually landed, or maybe landed. When you go through these pages, you realize that there are thousands and thousands of images taken of the moon that just don't exist anywhere in any archive. I mean, thousands. I'm talking about like 8,000 on certain trips, 15,000 on another trip. Yes, some images do exist from the early lunar rovers, but not as many as you may think. And a lot of it doesn't really explain certain aspects of like how NASA was able to essentially confirm crash landing sites of microsatellites in the late 50s. There's this kind of discrepancy between the public knowledge of technology and then the private sector technology. So it seems like, especially in our circles, or if you've studied it, you realize that there is probably a level of technology that is not public, and that level of technology is very, very high. However, just from on a surface level, you have the idea of impact versus electrically formed craters, which is a big question. The shape of craters on the moon, which is another question, why they're actually not circular nor elliptical, but actually hexagonal. And why are they laser cut almost? And then whether human beings can actually walk on the surface, and if they did, why can no other country do this amazing feat when every technological achievement on Earth has been replicated omnispherically, right? So around the world, people at the same time come up with brilliant ideas. It's not just one group. Groups around the world, like little bacteria sectors, like little moss and fungi, create ideas independently of one another. Therefore, this idea that just the United States is the only ones that could do this one thing is actually quite strange. All right, I'm moving on from this topic, but that's my thoughts. Liminal says, I think Clavius is the base where the monolith is in 2001. Yep, you are correct. So let's zoom in there a little bit more on Clavius. Sorry, I've just been trying to hold the microphone. That's why I'm not moving around as much. But let's zoom in here. check it out. We've got some really nice detail on Clavius tonight. Clavius is is a specific feature on the moon where you see a chain of craterlets within Clavius here, strewn almost at the tip of a golden spiral, right? It looks like a tail, or it looks like a seashell kind of cone, Fibonacci spiral right there. But yes, I was just saying non-elliptical, but it's not really elliptical. If you see the top left corner, it's actually geometric and sharp. It's kind of an elongated hexagon. I see Silent Murmur. What's going on? Welcome, welcome. Silent Murmur says, it's not that the U.S. is the only country that does these things. It's that our focus is innovation and theirs isn't. Also great to see you, Silent Murmur. I think maybe we've kind of gone back and forth about this, but that's just an assumption. Like the reality is that America says men walked on the moon, and the reality is, or at least the public reality is that no other country has done this thing. And this thing, which is like walking a human being on the moon and bringing them back to Earth, is just an absolutely incredible, like staggering feat. And staggering feats have been replicated across the world in every possible way. From television to vehicles to aviation to internet to mobile phones to philosophy. And this one singular event cannot be replicated, no matter, like, with absolutely just no rationale, like no excuse could possibly explain why it really hasn't. Well, I don't want to say that, because the one really reasonable thing is that it's done in private. That's reasonable. Is that if it can be done, then it is done purely in private. If it cannot be done, I don't know. It's hard to say, because I think it actually could be done in some way. But I'm just pointing out the fact that we live in a kind of consensus world where the status quo says that don't look here. Mostly it's just don't look at this because money, political will, incentivization, and any number of reasons that don't really match up, that don't stack up to the idea that, like, no other country can do this or has done this thing. It's something that was done in the 70s. Right? Not a single technological achievement from the 70s hasn't been replicated, except this. And even the people, literally the people who went there, have. Here, I'll elaborate a little bit further. So technology not only has been replicated, but is cheaper and produced faster every single time. Almost in the same way we have this compression rarefaction of the wave function of our reality, we have this kind of ability to produce, once you produce something, you do it better and faster. And so the same people who went to the moon can't do it now. They have to redo the whole thing with this Artemis mission. There's something a little bit strange about it. I've said it in the past, but again, I don't know for sure. I see Silent Murmur said, it's not about that. Please elaborate and tell me. Do you see where I'm coming from, at least? I hear you on all the different rationale. There's a ton of rationale behind why not, why no one else has done it. I've read a lot about it, but every single time it makes me kind of just uneasy, because it just sounds like, don't look here, just please don't ask any more questions about this. That's what it always sounds like. It never sounds like new information. It never sounds like confident reasoning. Nobody ever says confidently, this is why it hasn't been done. It's always pomp, and it's always some sort of, I know y'all don't really like throw insults in here, but most of the comments on Reddit, Quora, Wiki, I mean, even Wiki in some ways are so condescending and patronizing that you're just like, are you talking about science, or are you talking about just character assassination? Ultimately, it's just saying, like, you're dumb, I can't believe you're asking this question, but also it's because of some strange reason that I can't really back up, but this is what I've been told. And so I don't mean to to be insulting to you, Silent Murmur. I'm just like saying that's how it always sounds to me. It's one of these things where like it's a little bit like when you talk about relativity or field or ether or plasma or any number of things. It always starts with "you're stupid" and also "here's what I've heard in the past." And I keep thinking, I'm like, so how can we get around talking about how can we get to talking about science in a way that actually is progressive and additive? And the way to do it, I think, is to just say, okay, that's fine if there is a story, but today, right now, on this stream, when we're thinking about it, let's think about something new. Let's think about possibility. Let's see, Mimsicle says, Werner von Braun, or von Braun, had help from the Greys in Scotland. He sent Rudolf Hess there. So I think that, yes, there are some ties, of course, to Werner von Braun and the Nazi scientists who worked on the rocket ships. However, I definitely don't believe that there are Greys. At least I don't think there's proof of Greys. And I definitely think that, or at least now, I'm on the side that pretty much all the UFO stuff is man-made. And so until that's completely proven wrong, I'm thinking that's the only place where we have any real evidence. Mankind made UFOs, and any type of abduction story or ufology story is related to that. Let's see. NGC says, it's daytime here, and I can see the moon in my eastern sky at the same time you're watching it in the night sky. Upside down head. I know, that's kind of, it's just so amazing. And it almost like is a mirror of this symmetry of consciousness, this interplay between our frame of reference as humans and the creation of our reality moment to moment. And you're creating your reality where you are, and I'm creating my reality here, and we're co-creating a reality together on this stream. And we're all kind of extracting, and we're resonating with this experience as we create it. Oh, Mimsicle says, Gray is a surname in Scotland. They were financing Germany. Oh, my bad. I misunderstood that for aliens. The Greys, sorry. Interesting. No, I didn't know about that, but were you implying, Mimsicle Renegade, that, the missions worked because they had Werner von Braun and other scientists and no other country had that science? Is that what you're trying to say? Liminal says, a moon mission is exorbitantly expensive and complex and frankly not justified post-Apollo, in my opinion. So that's exactly what I'm saying. So if you read what you wrote, and then I ask you, what other technology achievement has these factors? None. Not cars, not airplanes, not cell phones, not compute. Every single technological advancement on Earth, every single one, not only was created in multiple places, not just one place. Of course, the narrative is made by the person who gets to market first, but ultimately, things are created. I'm trying to think of the word that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, where things happen, not panspermically, but things arise at all places at once. Things don't just come from one node. So all technological achievements have not only been replicated and reproduced, but reproduced faster and cheaper and run more efficiently over time, except for this one thing. I just don't think that there's any type of Anyway, I was talking about it earlier about it's $50 billion total per year. So there are not only people now who have $50 billion, but there are companies that have way more than $50 billion on their balance. And NASA right now is a wing of the military. This idea that somehow NASA's budget is separate from that is nonsense. No one ever says it in those Reddit and Quora threads. No one responds to the so-called debunkers with the fact that, oh, NASA's budget is this, and therefore they would never do it. But that's totally untrue, because the military budget is $500 billion, and just a fraction of that could run exactly the same mission. So the money is there. You could say the willpower is not there, but that makes no sense, because it's the same thing as like, why ever run another marathon, or why make a faster car, or why make a faster computer? Moore's law alone proves this wrong. Let's see. Jedi Princess says the secret died with von Braun. He is the key. I remember that story about. It was also Neil Armstrong left something on his tombstone about the veil, right? Look under the veil, look behind the veil. But Wernher von Braun, I don't know. When you let me gather my thoughts. But if you really look up videos, if you go and look up the videos of Wernher von Braun, you'll see that he's not only is he brilliant, but he didn't think they could get to the moon. That's what's really interesting about Wernher von Braun. He wasn't certain that these missions could work. They just magically worked overnight, and no one else could do it except the series of missions between 69 and 75. And of course, you could say Apollo 13 almost crashed and all this stuff, but this idea of getting men from Earth to the moon and back is staggeringly monumental. It's worth every penny, and there should be will from every single agency to replicate this, because of Moore's law, because of technological reproduction, and because the money today is available and people use it for the dumbest possible things. So I don't buy any of the money argument, nor do I buy the fact that people just gave up. Does it happen in private? Maybe. Does it happen with plasma tech? Maybe. Hex tech? But let's see. Liminal says there are no countries that can justify that kind of cost, in my opinion. I know, but again, read your own sentence. Maybe, but you could say that about pretty much any technology. There's no country that can justify the cost of making tanks. There's no country that can justify the cost of mining Bitcoin, right? China, also China's sending rovers to the far side of the moon, right? So they clearly can run missions. So people are sending missions to the moon. I would believe that there is no willpower if people basically gave up space entirely. If there were no missions to space at all, I would say, okay, I guess people don't have the willpower. But if there's willpower to go to terraform Mars, Bad Pex Alpha, the electric universe is the key. Sorry, JP, yeah, I was talking about Wernher von Braun, but yeah, so if you look up Wernher von Braun, he was hedging his bets, right? That's what you're saying about going or not going. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of these things that there's a lot of fluffy, and I say fluffy, I just mean non-specific language around all this stuff. No willpower. It's so abstract. There's no money, but then you look at the numbers, the money is there. There's no technology. The tech obviously has to exist, right? If it was done once, then the tech exists. So, and you really dig in and you say no, I'm not going to accept fluffy answers. I'm going to ask the secondary and tertiary questions. You start to realize that, no, there is money. Technology is reproduced, and no other country has done it for some reason that no one can really answer. No country has said it. The Chinese don't come out and say we're not going to the moon. They're trying to go to the moon. Russia is still sending spacecraft. I'm just saying, people have not lost willpower for this. Also, there's a space force, so there is money and there's willpower. Eric Jurgensen says, why aren't there one-way suicide missions to the moon? Yeah, I mean, I don't want people to commit suicide, but there are, why don't you have a billionaire I mean, there are people who have trillions of dollars now on Earth, right? People have hundreds of billions of dollars. You're saying none of them, not a single one of them was like, that's it, I'm going to the moon. Here's some photos, check it out, y'all. Not one? I mean, people have done the craziest possible shit on Earth. And people try and copy each other constantly. Biomimicry is really inherent in human construct. That makes it way cheaper. Well, yes, it definitely does. Joe Bristow says, why don't they have a 24-hour stream of video from a satellite showing our Earth or the moon by now? Look, I mean, I know that kind of falls a little bit in the flat Earth camp, and you know, y'all, that this is not a flat Earth channel, even though I respect everybody's opinion. But that is definitely a great question. Like, why isn't there a 24-hour video, like, live stream of Earth? Yes, you'd say the ISS, but I'm talking about like a Lagrange satellite or a satellite from a million miles out, like showing the Earth constantly, like the one, you know, what was it, the Subaru? No, that's the telescope. There is a satellite that takes a picture from a Lagrange point, but still, 24-hour stream, why not? Yeah, good question. Jedi Princess says private, like in the movie Contact. Actually, let me just zoom out here. But yeah, that's a great point, you know, where they create these plasma rocket sites, and you don't necessarily see the rocket ships take off because it's not thermonuclear blast off, and not thermal blast off, like explosive blast off. And who knows, there could be a very thriving lunar excursion to the entire system going to the moon right now, and the public might not be aware of it. So again, I constantly try and say, like, there could be, because I want there to be. It's not like I want to sit here and espouse conspiracies and say, like, my conspiracy is right. That's what I told you so. No, I'm pretty just bummed out that this is the situation that we find ourselves in 50 years after the original moon missions. So, Jason Lane, what's going on? Welcome. Says, do you really think they can get out of atmosphere, let alone the vacuum chamber, when we can't even deal with the ocean pressure? Don't ban me. You know, again, valid, you know, good question. I would say there are a lot of good answers to how ships can leave the Earth. I definitely think that robots, like spacecraft, metal, you know, because the Earth, you know, space is not different than us. Right, space is a fractal recursion of what's on Earth and what's in our bodies and what's in our fields. So I don't think that space travel itself is falsified. I think that human biological entities leaving Earth, going to another planet, and coming back is kind of this unbelievably staggering, monumental event that people just write off. And for me, I think when you really consider it, you think that this is the most important thing possible. This is like one of the absolute most important points in the in our human construct is, can biological life walk on another planet and come home to tell the story? Like, this is miraculous. And yet the types of dialogue and discussion around it is, you're a tinfoil hatter, you're an idiot, of course they did it, there was no question, cringeworthy, you know, just totally fluffy, character assassination, very little science behind it, just a ton of excuses. But what I'm saying is that, no, it's an absolute miracle of miracles that this happened, or if it did happen. And if it did, why aren't we, like, really into it and figuring it out? And why haven't others done it? Because it's so crazy. Because I don't want to say, oh, they're such lying bastards. No, I want to see this happen. So, look, if the Artemis missions and the next 10 years we actually have people go to the moon and the footage looks real and things seem realistic, I'm going to buy it. But until that happens, you go online right now and it still seems weird. The whole idea of people going to the moon is just mired in ad hominem attacks and very little science. Let's see. The data rate at that distance wouldn't give you the video of the fidelity you want. Well, I would urge you guys to like, sorry, not that specifically, but in general, go look at the footage from the 50s from craft going to the moon, and it's pretty good. They were sending thousands of photos back on very primitive technology. Like the whole time I was looking at these older, if you really the page, I got to pull up the page here, but it's like just type in all lunar missions, and you'll just see a list, and they link to each of the archive pages. And you'll see that the footage that was taken in the 50s was actually pretty decent. The cameras were good. They were sending data back from unmanned craft. And I just feel like today the technology is like a 10,000-fold better. You could send a camera the size of a pinhead and send back signals that are beamed multiple ways. And there are just ways to do it. I'm convinced that there are. If you can terraform Mars, if people talk about terraforming Mars, you can definitely send back pictures from space in some capacity. Liminal says, Artemis is strategically motivated, in my opinion, to compete with China's ambitions for a lunar settlement. So, see, that actually makes more sense to me, right? But it also proves my point, which is there is will to go back to the moon, right? So the argument that people don't go back to the moon because there's a lack of will is a non-argument. The fact is that there is will to go to the moon, and therefore me saying, like, why has, China should just literally have been able to send men to the moon first time. It's like saying, think about it like this. It's like saying America developed the computer and then iterated on it 20 times, and now we have these supercomputers, but then China wanted to build a computer and they had to start from zero. That's just nonsense, right? Countries borrow technology and build on other, humans' ideas. So this idea that China couldn't just immediately invest the money and build on old technology to take people to the moon just doesn't make any sense. Of course that's how it works. Nobody starts from zero on cell phones or automobiles. People use technology that's been invented and reverse engineer that. Let's see. Eric says, how do you rectify the problem of free space loss? Electric waves peter out merely from expanding into the vacuum space with no obstructions. Let's see. Free space loss. Electric waves peter out merely from expanding into the volume of space with no obstructions. I mean, this idea of field, let me see if I have my image pulled up. Let's talk about field for a moment. All right, so this is an image that I've been working on. Let's wait till it comes up and I'll talk about it for a second. But if we just imagine that the human in this picture, the outline of the person, is not only every large object, every cosmological object, including our universe, but also the smallest object in the universe. The absolute smallest object, right? And so if you imagine that this structure that I've been talking about, this donut or the torus, this is a cross-section of the field. You have the pinched plasma tube in the middle, the hypotrochoid, the hyperboloid, the hourglass, or the pinched plasma tube. And you have energy coming in from the ether. And what is the ether? And all this is, in my opinion, of course, but it's coming from, listening to Ken Wheeler, Eric Dollard, Tesla, Thunderbolts Project, on and on and on, all these different examples, putting them together. This is what I visualize as what the invisible matrix is around every single unit in the universe, from human to Planck unit to cosmological massive star. Looks exactly like this at a certain point. I mean, very simplified version of this. This is a very simplified version of. I see Kronos in the chat. What's up? Good to see you. Hope your channel is doing well. I haven't seen you in a while, but I hope you're well. Let's see, Musk says there's basically no chance we're living in base reality. What are the odds the moon is the same diameter of the sun from our perspective? Well, that is a great question, and it's two different things, right? So I'm not sure when you mean base reality, but if we're talking about this idea of onion skin layers, I would imagine that our universe, our entire existence, could exist on one layer of one of these much larger layers, right? So our entire universe could be a single slice of these toroidal fields. So in terms of base reality, lower reality, upper dimensions, raising vibrations, lower dimensions, this could be a geometric correlate to it. When you're talking about the odds that the moon is the same diameter of the sun from our perspective, there are a lot of different things that emanate, like that come into mind, that come into field when I think about that. One, of course, there's the kind of numerological, coincidental, kind of not spooky nature, but mystical, esoteric nature of that coincidence or pattern recognition, right? Or, size match. The second thing that I think of is the potential of quantization and harmonic fractalization, and the fact that things are, spaced in a way throughout the universe and throughout the field in a way that is very pattern oriented, and this is why we see patterns. So I definitely think that a lot, years ago I would have said, wow, what a crazy coincidence. It's just unbelievable that that's the case. And I still feel that way a little bit, but more so the nature of the geometric inherent structure of plasma, of the ether and plasma and our universe. It is possible that planets are harmonically placed in areas where you might end up with something that will completely overlap another object beyond it. It's it's not unreasonable to imagine that. Let's see. I see Gnostic Chef in the chat. What's going on? Gnostic. Is it Gnostic or Gnostic? The Gnostic Chef. What is the measure of a man, the ruler of the universe? Again, ruler, right? To rule and to be ruled by the ruler, the measurement instrument, right? So what we're looking at here, and I'll get back to the moon in a second, but let me get my my paint program. That's not working. Why? I don't know. Okay, never mind paint program right now, but the thing here where I have short-term memory, half-life, early life, and birth, this is a very simplistic representation, but the idea is that your birth plasma layer, the etheric plasma layer that is around each and every one of our bodies right now, and when I say humans, I also imply tiny particles, quantum particles, and every creature in between quantum particles and us. And particles, I actually mean dipole moments, instantiations of consciousness, so interplay between consciousness and ether. And what I mean by that is oscillations, vibrations, or maybe sound oscillations, vibrations in etheric plasma, which is the whole universe. And I was saying earlier, and I think I cut myself off, but the whole etheric universe that I imagine, again, my opinion and from learning from other people, is that it's all a version of light, and light oscillating at certain different vibrations. And hard light, very intense vibrational light, ends up creating creates matter, the building blocks of matter, hydrogen, and then the periodic table is an emanation of hydrogen, an oscillation along a Fibonacci spiral that creates all the elements of the periodic table. And this spiral is shown right here, looking at it from the side view. The Fibonacci spiral emanates from the center of this torus outwards, upwards, and downwards, and sideways, and in basically an omnidirectional radiation oscillation. So the whole body is doing that, but also every tiny quantum bit is also sending out a vortexial golden ratio spiral that is quantized and also creates a field modality. The field modality is intrinsically tied to what we consider, where we're talking about this idea of mass and matter, and how the frame of reference is really what we all experience. This idea of relativity is that we at the center of this field experience everything as us being the center frame of reference. And so when we interact at all with reality, we create a moment, a unit of time, and a unit of gravity, and a unit of everything. Every single thing that engages in this dipole moment, this resonance between self and field, or moment and field. Not even moment. The moment is the resonance between self and other, or point and field, creates the next point and field. And when it does that, it creates the future moment, time, and its own gravity. And it also creates the past in symmetry, and imprints into the field that propagates outwards. So birth layer here ends up being the furthest out, just like a potato skin or an apple skin starts very small and ends up being out at the very edge of it. The bark of the tree, right? The bark of the tree starts right at the center and then emanates outward, and then you get this very outer layer that was the first layer. So our birth aura, or birth plasma layer, is the furthest possible layer that we are carrying with us at all times. And not just we, but Earth is carrying its birth plasma layer. And if you look at the Earth's Van Allen radiation belts, you'll see that they've been mapped, and they look a lot like this. So, birth, early life, half-life, when you remember stuff, think about yesterday. You remember it very clearly because the layer of memory, that thin layer of plasma, is close to your body. If you ask somebody when they were born, it's very difficult to send a signal to that layer because it's very far away from you. It's maybe 30 feet, 16 feet, who knows, right? 6 feet. Eileen McCusick, who talks about the human biofield, says it possibly could be 10, 20 feet around the body. And this idea of these memories going with you at all times and informing the next layers is really interesting. But also the fact that it's very difficult to remember your birth and early life. It's easier to remember your teenage life and your adult life, and very easy to remember yesterday because it's close to you and it's more it's oscillating more strongly than this birth layer, even though the birth layer is still with you. And this is how what I think represents genetic code, passing down information from the ancestors. It's stored in layers. That information is stored in layers in cymatic toroids. So you'll see the little black thing where it says cymatic resonant toroidal. This I took from, I think, a Google image. I feel like these are the types of pictures that Rupert Sheldrake and Merlin Sheldrake are taking pictures of. It's water cymatics, kind of free-floating water cymatics, so oscillating water molecules, creating these very complex toroidal knots. Now, does every memory and that we think of, that we have, look like this? I'm not certain of that, but I imagine at the quantum level you have these very complex structures, the stuff that you see when you hallucinate, that actually contain not only their own time and frame of reference. So memories are alive. That's what's so cool about it. Absolutely every unit, every dipole moment that is created by the interaction between electron and photon, not being particles but perturbations in the field, these end up becoming the next point of reality that ends up being stored in a plasma layer and then is used by the center source to create the next plasma layer and push out the next layer, onion skin, on and on and on. Every single natural being is structured this way. And if you look at the cross-section of a tree or the cross-section of a leg, don't cut anybody's leg off, but it looks like this. It radiates out from the center. Why does it radiate and why is it more intense at the center? Because there's electrical filamentary action, coaxial light moving through the center like the spinal column. And therefore, along this electrical filament that comes from the ether itself, and we are in the ether and the ether simultaneously, is that we are powered from within and from without. So we are within the field, but we're also creating the field. And this is how things have magnetic fields. And I'm going to take a little break here real quick. But the last thing I'll say here real quick is just, Kronos says, okay, I'm impressed. Thank you. Well, that definitely stroked my ego a little bit because I'm on a rant here, but I do appreciate you saying that. I really hope it's not coming across as like an ego trip. This to me is what I've been thinking about for like 6 or 7 years now, and thinking like I'd love to share it with people because to me it explains so many different things, and you know, it explains optics and explains sound and explains vibes, it explains music. There's so many things that are derived from this. Of course, esoterically and philosophically, it also resonates and makes sense. Like it's so self-fulfilling and self-derived that anyway, I love it, and stuff that I love to share. So thank you for listening to me talk about all this stuff. So yeah, so layers, right? I think I kind of lost my train of thought here. So I think I need some water, a little smoke here, little break. But I'm going to take this image down, but I'll put it up again in a little bit. I think I've shown you all the apple core, right? You have the hypotrochoid. Same thing, like the apple, you see the apple outlines a Birkeland filament, you know, the coaxial filament. I said yesterday about peeing, where everybody can look at their pee and you can see the water spiraling. But pretty much water spirals because it traces the outline of an electrical coaxial light filament. In a way, not in a way, but in a very literal way, water is actually light, right? So high intensity light ultimately becomes hydrogen, ultimately becomes water. And this is why it's very cool to imagine that it's almost like light perceiving itself through sound vibration. And this is what Tesla said, right? Tesla literally says there can be no other answer except sound waves in the ether. And Ken Wheeler was saying it's not in the ether because it's the ether itself perceiving itself. So I find that fascinating. I find that makes a lot of sense to me. So apple, right? Butterfly traces the same types of shapes. The antenna of the butterfly actually looks like the coaxial and a DNA twist. Hexagons that bees make, right? Hexagons are very cool, and that's what I'll talk about next. So, feeling like I'm making sense tonight. Thank you, Kronos. I appreciate that. I see Bryce Eshelman says, very interesting. Welcome, Bryce. Silent Murmur says, yes, the apple node grows on the Birkeland current like we do. I mean, like, it's so cool. What's interesting about looking at all the science, the debate in science right now, is that people are trying to say, this is the theory for this thing, and this is a theory for that thing. And it's very myopic, right? It's almost like, it's like Ken Wheeler makes the joke. Again, like I kind of went back to Ken Wheeler today. I was like, man, I understand why people find him off-putting. There's a lot of stuff that he says that like doesn't make sense. That's not even true. A lot of stuff is just very opinionated and sometimes harsh and sometimes jaded and cynical. But I think when he talks about this idea of light and the ether and gravity and magnetism, I think he's really on point because the stuff he's saying, interestingly enough, just feels good. It feels real. And when you hear people trying to debunk him, it feels like character assassination. It doesn't feel like science. So what was I saying? So field perturbations, Einstein, what was it? Damn. So many things on my mind tonight. But the Apple node, Birkeland filament, general reflection. Jedi Princess, have a wonderful night. Thanks for stopping by. Sleep well, and catch you on the next one. Fibonacci. Yeah, I lost it a little bit. Okay, but I'll get back here and we'll talk about just the relationship of, well, spheres, one, spheres being like the fundamentally strongest kind of shape in reality, and even this like artist dyslexic theory on everything explains that really the smallest possible strongest form is this sphere. But I don't think he actually explains the hexagons, and that's what's so cool here, is that this is something that, not that I've discovered necessarily, but that I've just kind of put together. And you realize that spheres, when two spheres come together, they create a boundary layer. And that's where we get these sharp edges. And you can see it very clearly in Bubbles in the Sink. And you can see it here with Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility. And you see a pentagon against a hexagonal formation. And you start to see the incommensurability manifest as lunar geology, which is just crazy. The fact that, oh, I know what it is. The idea that contemporary science tries to create disciplines, and it basically tries to say that, look, things work this way on the quantum scale, but don't make them work on a larger scale. Like the cosmological scale, totally different. Or like the human scale, totally different. Or human consciousness is different than animal consciousness. But that, I think, again, is myopic, like I was saying, because, yeah, that's what it was. Ken Wheeler talks about the idea of people looking at ice and water and saying those are two different things, right? They are modalities of the same thing. Just like Alan Watts when he talks about love and hate being two sides of the same coin, right? This interplay between self and other, particle and wave, a field and oscillation, actually is the same thing, but just in a different modality. All right, little break now. Primary water H3O2. Gosh, what? Let me see. Do I know what these characters are? Is it lambda? It's definitely lambda. Lambda phi theta, or lambda theta phi. Or is it lambda beta phi? I don't know. Well, welcome. I seen you yesterday too, so welcome to the channel. Kronos says, I love Alan Watts. Me too, man. Like Alan Watts like rounded out this a confirmation bias. I guess a confirmation bias you would say, but he talks about the electric universe, the connected universe, right? And the idea of self and other from a physical, from having really established knowledge of particle physics and astronomy. Like Alan Watts was quite studied when it comes to astronomy, cosmology, quantum field theory, etc. But he presented it from the standpoint of the Brahma, right, and prana and nirvana, and he used these Hindu terms about breath, centering, self and other, tattvam asi, and all these ideas. And I think that's why it was lost a little bit. People find it very comforting, but he was talking about physics too. And he really actually reinforces this idea that you can't take the self out of the field, and you can't have the field without the self. We're inextricably tied to each other and the larger whole. And I think that's beautiful. I don't think it's like imprisonment. I think it's freeing to think about it that way. And I see Douglas Perry in the chat too. All right, let's play a couple of tunes here and take a quick break. I know I've been saying that for a bit, but this is the real time. Coming up, oh, we're already at midnight, 12:11, 8/8/22. And let's check out our Luna. I think I might get Saturn tonight as well. All right. All right, classic Light of the Moon up in the house, up in the spacecraft. Spacecraft Earth. Shout out to Buckminster Fuller. He had the right idea. Earth is almost like our spacecraft. Earth peoples us, and we get to ride Gaia through space, through a stream, spiral, coaxial light filament. It is pretty cool. Kronos, I write all the stuff, so nothing is copywritten copyright strikeable. That was the original idea behind writing music for the show. Of course, I used to do shows live back in the day, like 2015, 2016, where I'd do cover songs. And man, all those videos got copyright. Thankfully, this channel is still up because I went back and made sure I deleted all the old shows where I played any covers, wrote any covers. But everything since 2016 has been original. Interestingly enough, just anecdotally, I guess, I got not a copyright strike, but like your song sounds like this because I used a drum sample from Logic. And so I used to have this track that would come on, and it was like, blah, 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 claimed this song. And I'm like, I wrote this damn song. It's like, no, this guy wrote this other song and used the exact same drum sample, and they would, like, demonetize the video. Not that I have this channel monetized, but or, like, videos monetized. But if you ever see an ad on any of my old videos, it's because of that stupid shit. But, let's see. Hot Rod Scott, I see, and I see Fantasy showed up. And if I missed you and you want to shout out, let me know. Sometimes I'll miss people coming in. It's dark mode here on the YouTube studio, and it's like so tough to read white text against black, to be perfectly honest, especially when I got the moon like right here too. Let's see. Just reading a few of the comments here. I wanted to talk about serenity and tranquility. I got a little burb going across the moon. But, yeah, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. So, the hexagonal nature of things, because I think that's one of the few things, I say few, I mean, I talk about a lot on this channel, so I feel like nothing's a few, but definitely hexagons on the moon are one of those things that I feel a little bit of ownership over. I mean, I'm definitely not the first person to point it out. Shout outs Ralph Jurgens that they reference, and Brian J. Ford in the Thunderbolts Project videos where Stuart Talbot narrates, and he talks about electric thunderbolts creating impacts or creating scars on the moon and Mars. They reference originally back in the day Ralph Jurgens from the 70s, I think, Jurgens, and who else? And Brian J. Ford. And of course, Immanuel Velikovsky is really the root of kind of proposing interplanetary cosmic lightning bolts. I imagine he probably also wasn't the first, but either way, hexagons on the moon, though, kind of are a tie-in from this idea that, I think the first time I saw it was the Billy Yelverton channel, which is Too Tough 2 or whatever, Tough 2 or something, TUFF. So Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers, again, a lot of people have opinions of him. I definitely feel like I used to be part of that group way back when it was like Eyes Open, and we listened to it every morning, and then after a while I was like, this just makes me uneasy. It's like a show that is like, he's brilliant, all the stuff, and he could be 100% correct about what he's talking about, but there's a vibe of that kind of prepper vibe, and I just can't live like that. I'm more of a hippie, and I kind of don't care if the earth goes up in a ball of flame, like, I think that's the natural process of things. So anyway, Ben Davidson met with Billy Yelverton, and they did these laboratory experiments where they used really some of the most sophisticated versions of these experiments, where they used different layers of sediment, and they used different voltages and moved arcs and or just had an arcing plate over the sediment or the ceramic or the clay or the sand. And they used different materials, of course, and layered them. But it was very regimented, and I don't think Ben, maybe Ben came up with it and wanted to try it, or maybe Billy, I think, was already sort of doing stuff like that in his lab. Now, Billy Elverton hasn't posted in maybe 6 or 7 years. I went and checked the channel, but if you look at the videos, I've linked to him many times in the past, but truly that's sort of where I saw it. And I saw it before I even found Thunderbolts Project, because I was like, man, this is crazy. Because I was interested in the moon way before, and then kind of at the same time pretty much, I was like, what are electrical arcing discharge in a laboratory? And then I found Thunderbolts Project, same sort of time. But yeah, so cosmic lightning bolt is just a version of static discharge between your finger and a doorknob, or your finger and a bed sheet after you've laundered it, right? You've seen these little tiny electrical Lichtenberg lightning bolts, let's call them. And then we've seen lightning bolts in the sky, in the night sky, or in the night sky, but actually, yeah, in the night sky, but in daytime sky too. During storms, we've seen lightning. We've also seen red sprites, which are bundled red lightning. And we've seen blue sprites and blue angels above that. So the layered lightning around Earth has been photographed and filmed. We've also have Kirlian photography, where people put their hands and objects on an electro plate and with a special type of camera. And you see the so-called aura, but mostly it's like electric filaments that surround the human body and all things. And then finally, if you look at the sun, pictures from the sun right now, live images of the sun literally has filaments all around it. And it's in and of itself is made is filamentary noise, is kind of Perlin noise, but really it's full of filaments. So we see these Lichtenberg kind of lightning patterns, and finally, actually look at your palm of your hand, and you'll see Lichtenberg patterns and figures that look like the surface of planets on your palm, imprinted. So this is fascinating. What is the relationship, the correlation between the Lichtenberg pattern and the rest of the universe? And the answer here is that these patterns are fractally recursive, which means they occur at all scales. That's really the simple answer here, is that lightning bolts that we see that are extremely high voltage, that hit the ground and create these Lichtenberg patterns when they strike, and they themselves are Lichtenberg patterns, which is why they cause that shape, exist. This is the first level of it. And then they also exist at every scale. And so when you really imagine the fact that in between planets you also have these huge lightning bolts, it's not a massive leap of logic. It's actually more unbelievable if there were nothing connecting things. But that's what the popular science status quo says today, is that space is relatively empty. I mean, yes, it's changing. I know that the narrative is slowly shifting because people get it. They know that space is not empty. But there was a narrative when I was a kid that space is essentially, there's nothing in it. There's definitely no electricity, and there's definitely nothing. It's really, really nothing. Don't look here. Don't look at please don't look here. But now they're sort of shifting over, and I say they, the proverbial they. I just mean politics and media, and the public narrative says, like, space is not actually empty. But what I'm saying is that if you really imagine it, space is completely interconnected, top to bottom, big and small, at every scale. And this is how things connect communicate. This is how things see each other. This is how things hear each other. This is how things send information back and forth. So very inherently, fundamentally, at the lowest level, at the most quantum level, but also at the human level, planetary, cosmological level, scale, etc., 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 Lichtenberg lightning bolts, so to speak, connect things. And when we see them, so to speak, see quote unquote again, because seeing is sympathetic resonance. So you're not really seeing it, but you're engaging this lightning bolt. This lightning bolt goes into glow mode. So the connector is already there, it just fires up. And when you don't see it, it's in dark mode. And if you look at this idea that the lightning bolt is already there. The lines in your hand are there. They're just either illuminated or vibrating and oscillating, or they're vibrating at a much lower density or rate that you can't really see them. But they are always there. And this is the connected web of the cosmos in manifest physics, like not imaginary ad hoc, ad hominem, but actual literal connectivity. So if we take that as a premise and you start to imagine that the idea that we have of craters on the moon are that 2 billion years ago there were showers, meteor showers, that struck the moon and created all the features that we see today. If you type in JPL, how the moon was formed, you'll see the long-standing animation, the one ring to rule them all, the one crazy, awesome-looking CG render of the moon formation. But when you really understand what you're looking at and you've seen the moon 1,000 times and you start to understand geology a little bit, you start to think, you're like, wait, this render doesn't make sense actually. A lot of it feels good, sort of makes sense, but it doesn't actually make sense. And this is the status quo. Like, really get on YouTube. You're on YouTube, sorry. Go and type in how the moon was formed, and you'll see the exact video that I'm referencing. And this animation is from 10 years ago or more. And it's based on the fact that, like, Mare Imbrium, Mare Serenitatis, Sea of Crises, switching back and forth between Latin, all the features, all of these awesome features. I need to get my paint program working here so I can scribble. Let me scribble, please. This is what I was sketching before the show, our eyeball. So I'll get to the craters in a second, but quickly, like I was just showing how this idea, this point where the image is flipped from when you resonate with a foci, a point between two emanating wavefronts. What was that? That was weird. Okay, but anyway, point is this whole idea of how we see things at all using the field, right? But our eye is actually sending out an low-level electrical pulse, and then the new photon dipole moment is created. We create a moment right here with its own time. Well, that's not true. When we create this moment, we experience it as time. But we're creating a new moment with its own gravity, its own torus, its own frame of reference. So it now has its own time. So this moment that we've just created by visualizing something becomes in and of itself sentient by virtue of having been created in this dipole moment. And then this is how gravity works. Gravity is created, instantiated at every fractal scale. But I think I kind of jumped way too far ahead here. Let me reset this and sketch some craters. I see Ellie Wynn in the chat room. Great to see you. Hi, Spacelings. How are the cats? How's Wingsley? Kronos says, starting to sound like Gurdjieff, right? Like the Gurdjieff principle stuff. And Rudolf Steiner. I mean, I don't want to be arrogant and say, like, I know any of this stuff, really. Like, I feel like maybe I could be accused of regurgitating certain things. But my quest here is to really fundamentally understand the relationship between all these things. Therefore, like, I can maybe speak about it more simply, like in a more layman fashion, but that in a way that allows just all of us to really grasp it. Tangentially, right? Like, I always want to go off on a tangent, but I think that's part of the science culture on YouTube, which it just not only talks down to people and insults people, but condescends and patronizes, but also cannot even engage in discussion in a way without, like, getting upset or calling character assassinating. So I feel like, what was I talking about? I was taking a compliment, and then I was also saying that I don't know much, but I know something. I know a little bit, and I'm trying to understand it better. And I'm working it out while I'm talking it out to y'all. because I feel like I'm in a field with a bunch of smart people who also get this, because there are like, what, 20, 30 of us, pretty much. Let's see. More Jello, please. Nice to see you, bud. Long time. Yeah, I like listening to me vomit. I feel like I'm vomiting the last couple of nights. I just have it's like a culmination of all the years of working on this shit. And then, you know, like when you finally, I don't know if any of y'all practice instruments or anything like that, but like, or play chess or any games like that, where if you strive to be on a leaderboard or get better at it, there are these periods where you're like, man, I'm not getting any better. I'm just like not progressing. And this past few months, I feel like, oh, now I've kind of gotten past that level. I have a sense of, when I listen to Ken Wheeler, like I really can go through all his videos and I'm like, okay, that point, okay, I sort of get that. I sort of understand what he means there. It's starting to come into focus, and that's what happens when you spend enough time, like incessantly, obsessively doing something. Like guitar playing too. Like I played for so many years and I sucked. I feel like I sucked. And now, like, I don't think I'm like nearly a technical guitar player, but I feel like I got through those layers, you know. And we could talk about layers. It's all here. Am I talking a lot? I'm talking a lot. Okay. New file. Don't save changes. Just get this here. Really, I'm trying to be coherent tonight about each topic that I'm talking about. So let's get clear here with the crater stuff. So it's all compacted in this show. Hey, Wingsley is hot and laying with a melting ice bottle. I need one of those too. Like all my drinks are empty on the table. Okay, so where are we at? Paint program. Okay, that's looking good. All right, what is my simplistic point? So I made the whole premise of like why it's possible and why it's probably reasonable that there are giant electrical thunderbolts, lightning bolts in space. And why, like, this idea that we can't talk about it, or when you ask a question or you hear all these big videos, these popular science channels where they're like, no way, you couldn't have this. It's just, you know, crackpot or cringeworthy. They just use character assassination and bullshit to cover up for the fact that it's possible that there could be giant lightning bolts in space. So let's say you had giant lightning bolts in space coming down. And look, I'm creating like this Lichtenberg lightning bolt, but I'm wiggling it, but I'm recursively, like my entire body looks like this, right? Like all my veins look like this, my neurons look like this, the universe looks like this, right? So let's say there were cosmic lightning bolts between the moon and, say, was it Mars, right? Maybe Mars, certain type of interaction between Mars and the moon eons ago. I know that maybe it doesn't have to be Mars. Maybe the moon emanated from Jupiter's red spot. That's possible. So much bigger. Jupiter had this huge thing, and boom, moon is young, and it pops out of Jupiter. It's birthed by Jupiter, let's say. But of course, the umbilical cord is what? An electrical filament connecting the moon and Jupiter. So as the moon is cooling, it's being essentially zapped by giant arcing lightning that could extend for minutes at a time, hours, days, weeks, right? Maybe not billions of years, maybe short periods of time, right? Creating massive features on the surface of the moon. This is the postulate, right? This is the idea that is just like boils everybody's peanuts. It like burns everybody's pants to a cinder. Like when you hear about, when I watch videos like contemporary science videos or people who try and debunk electric universe, like I don't even know what to say, because they're not even considering the possibility of something like this. As soon as you consider the possibility of interplanetary interaction creating features on these individual planets, and how this is how people, when they talk to each other, we use the same methods to communicate with one another and change each other using words, right? It's like, and we make art with the same means. So the idea that planets can't interact is way sillier than planets can interact. That's really where we're at. Planets can interact. How might they interact? With giant lightning bolts. Does that sound ridiculous to a lot of people? Sure, but to me, those people are ridiculous for not even entertaining the possibility, because once you do, it makes a lot of sense. All right, that's the possibility realm. So we have, everybody knows we got lightning bolts. Then we think, okay, is it possible that planets connect? Right? Definitely possible. So now the shape thing. So if we're looking here, we got Sea of Serenity, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself a lot. Some of it is for myself, so I can be clear. But again, I know it's annoying when people repeat themselves. So Sea of Serenity outlined, and I'm not making this up. Y'all can do it yourself. You can see it. It's pentagonal, right? This is not circular. This is not elliptical. It's pentagonal. And then you have pretty much a straight line right here. And then you have a hexagon. Of course, there's a diamond right here. Mare Fecunditatis, kind of the wall of it has kind of creeped in, but if we just follow the outline of Sea of Tranquility along the corner being Proclus, right at the vertice, right there, you got a hexagon against a pentagon. Sea of Serenity, Sea of Tranquility, and then you got an elongated hexagon right here, Mare Crisium, Sea of Crises. And then, you know, because it's mapped out, I mean stretched and distorted across the spheroidal shape of the moon, Mare Fecunditatis has kind of a nested geometric chevron shape. And then you have, I think this is Nectaris, reverse pentagon, against a kind of nested hexagon. And on and on and on. Let's go here and we'll show you, like, I'll show you octagonal Mare Imbrium. Or is it octagonal? Yeah, octagonal Mare Imbrium. And the whole Oceanus Procellarum basin has geometry that's angular. So why is this important? What's angles? Like, what's the point of angles? So the point of angles is threefold, I think. Let's just put it there. But first premise is, I'm so tired of hearing lunar craters and Mare and Maria are circular. I'm just so tired of it. It's like the most ridiculous thing, because people clearly are not looking at the moon if they say that, or they don't have their own thinking. And I know that that's me, like, doing character assassination, but I don't mean it like that. My blood boils, but really it doesn't. It's just fascinating that if you really just look at it, these shapes are there. The shapes, I'm not making it up. It's always there. People can do it themselves and check. So, okay, we have these shapes. So I'm tired of seeing in public record, even Thunderbolts Project says circular, right? They say sometimes hexagonal, but it's not. It's all hexagonal, pentagonal, dodecahedral, octagonal. Very few of them are actual circles, maybe none. I'd love to hear everybody's opinion about this, but like, this is my little sketchy diagram here, but if you do it, you'll see that the surface of the moon and Mars, of course, and Earth, you'll see tons of angles and geometry and nested hexagons and on, and there's a reason for that. And why there is a great question between impact theory, where you have a meteor creating a feature, or you have a giant electrical arcing lightning bolt creating the feature. Right? These are two really interesting ideas. There could be something else, right? But, you know, maybe the other thing I thought of was, you know, when things expand, there you have cracks in the soil, so to speak, and these cracks end up following the lattice structure of the universe. In a way, it also supports electric universe. So even that theory, the idea that maybe it's not electric bolts or impacts, it's simply like the moon, like, from within had volcanic action and pimples, right, or dimples, and that's what created all the features, right? Maybe there were no impacts. I know that's a stretch, but let's say we're talking about electric arcing versus impact craters. And this is where you take laboratory experiments. And why I talk about laboratory experiments is because, again, if you go and type in impact craters in a laboratory, there's not one really super high quality video that replicates features on the moon. There just isn't. Go find it, link it to me, please. I'll take a picture and share it. Or I'll enjoy it because I'd love to see it. I haven't seen it. You see a lot of cake pans. You see a lot of dimple craters, like mound craters. You see craters that look a little bit like bullet holes, but then the actual impactor is still there in the middle of these craters, which don't exist on the moon at all and have not completely all pulverized, simply because the elements that the impactor that had to, the size of the impactor that would have had to exist to create Sea of Serenity and Tranquility would leave remnants. It couldn't all be pulverized and then leave, well, I say it couldn't, but in my mind I'm trying to imagine a laboratory experiment created by an impact that looks like the moon. Or Billy Yelverton, Electric Universe Eyes. Who was that other kid? I have it listed in a lot of my videos and in the description. But a bunch of people, Kronos, I'm not sure if you did it. You analyze stuff, right? But have you ever done electric discharge in the laboratory? But y'all have seen this stuff before. Either way, electric discharge in a laboratory actually does create features that we see on the moon and Mars. And that's really where the extent of it. Like, does it need to go any further? Probably not, but that's just like a big point, right? So establishing Lichtenberg patterns, lightning at all scales, possible planetary connectivity and lightning bolts, and then the fact that impact versus electric in a laboratory it does not reproduce the desired features, but electrical cratering in a laboratory does produce features that we see. So why does it? Why does it actually produce these features? I think people would think, oh, I'm going to stop there, but I'm not. But because let's say you have lightning bolts hitting the surface, coaxial filaments blasting and melting the surface of the moon. Why do they turn into hexagons and pentagons and nested hexagons? And so I think the reason is because the inherent fundamental structure of reality, what I was showing earlier, which is the cross-section of the torus and the hourglass shape, the hypotrochoid. You have the filament. This shape creates this shape. So hexagons are an emergent and outline the fundamental geometry of our universe. And why do they do that? Because this, like I was saying earlier, spherules are the strongest shape at the very smallest point. So two spherules next to each other will expand. And ultimately, boobies, ultimately, these two spherules will start to create boundary layers between the two of them. And this, my friends, is where you get straight angles and points and lines, and you get, really, it's tracing the outline to the Birkeland filament, right? And then it's actually just tracing also our magnetic fundamental geometry of the torus, right? At the center, the plasmoid, or the point of highest energy, the spinal column, the apple shape, the butterfly, the human mind, the human eye, the whole body, on and on and on. This shape is recursive throughout. But what's so cool about it is that this is how you get platonics. You get platonics because spheres begin to expand, and when spheres expand into one another, they create boundary layers between each other because of the attractive repulsive force of self-assembly. Because every circle, every point here is aware of itself. It's an instantiation of the ether between, it's like the dipole moment that I was talking about, the idea of an electron, which is really just charge, meeting a photon, which is light. And light is not really a particle, but it's an instance of light. And this dipole moment, this instantiation, creates this shape, this fundamental geometry at every scale. And not only every scale does it create this geometry, but this is the fundamental structure of everything. So language, vocal vibrations, the shape of the body, the shape of craters, the shape of absolutely everything fundamentally are scalar, recursive, fractal versions of this dipole moment. Beavers and boobies, exactly. Just checking back in the chat here. I'm kind of going off on a thing here. So if I missed anything, forgive me here. Let me read some stuff. Kronos says, I interviewed Electric Universe Eyes once about this. We discussed how moisture was a big factor, right, in whether or not the electricity creates mountains or canyons. Right, so I think, like, kind of to go off, not to go too far off on a tangent, but the idea, the fundamental modalities of water or saturation, or, well, I don't want to say saturation, but really the modalities of water and how they affect, how they interplay with the electrical current, the state of flow and oscillation is really, I mean, one and the same, but also infinitely possible. So different sedimentary deposits, different planetary surfaces, etc., and so forth. The human body, right, so to speak, has a surface, and our surface, you know, is burned by electricity, right? But of course, all around our body is electricity at the same time. So it's pretty fascinating how there are levels to the voltage, really, or the current of the current, our current, where we can survive because we're connected by lightning bolts, but also certain types of lightning bolts could melt us into a goop. Mike Kahn says manifestation. Yeah, this dipole moment is what you could conceive of as manifestation, right? When we talk about manifest, people try to imagine this magic thing where, like, no, I'll make a horse appear in front, I'll make a sandwich appear in front of me. I don't think that's what manifestation is. I think manifestation is when you look at the field, when we think we do the thing we do as looking into the field, and then things appear, that is manifestation. Like, existing itself is manifestation at the fundamental level. So, yes, so Kronos, that's awesome. And See the Pattern did some really cool stuff on wood. And really, I encourage anyone, even my followers, my fam here, but anybody who's following the channel, if you haven't checked out electric scarification or electric craters in a laboratory, please do check out See the Pattern, check out Billy Yelverton, and kind of dive there's another cat who's doing it. I forget his name now. He did a presentation on Thunderbolts Project, but you just see these shapes, and they mimic, and they biomimic in a way the stuff that we see on Mars and the Moon and on Earth and on our hands. So this moment that is created by the interaction between electron charge or charge and light, ether, creates spheres, and spheres expand because they are now alive and self-aware, and they expand into field, and field has resistance in the shape of other fields, and fields bump up against one another, thus creating boundary layers. And here is where I feel like, let's take it all the way back around, where you end up with kind of nested hexagons and nested pentagons. And if you look at your skin or leather up close, or electron microscopes of pretty much anything, you'll see extremely organized nested hexagons. And that's how and why bees create nested hexagons, because they start off as spherules, and once the spherules expand, the spherules end up creating extremely strong corners, because they are pushing against one another and nesting as tightly as possible. So the instantiation of of matter, of a dipole moment of charge and light, creates a sphere expands, meets another sphere, and creates a boundary layer. And so tying it all back together as to why Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility and on the moon looks like hexagons is because these things start off as sphere-like or circular craters, and they end up meeting boundary layers, resistance, and end up looking like these nested pentagons, hexagons. Further than that, if we take it, you can see that between all of these is our pinched plasma tube and our torus. Everywhere between two hexagons, you always have the donut, the torus, and the hypotrochoid or the hyperboloid or the hourglass shape with the Birkeland filament trace. So the entire world is literally nested versions of this fundamental geometry, where I got to give a shout out to Buddy James, Buddy Doherty, and the Doherty set. He's done the presentations on Thunderbolts Project recently. You can see this exact thing in a much more elaborate form with his drawings and his explanations. There is math to go along with it, you know, this kind of idea of harmonic, the Planck against the golden ratio, creating these harmonic cascades. There's a whole bunch of that stuff that I'm not like super technical about, but I you know, as a musician, it's pretty obvious that, you know, the distance between the planets is probably the distance between our notation modalities in a musical chart, you know, and probably our chakras also outline the quantization of where the planets are in their orbitals. Gnostic Chef, take it easy. Great to see you. And or you're not leaving. I see Mig's leaving, right? Miguel, take care. Nice to see you here, buddy. All right. I'll see you on the next one. Mick Kahn says constructive or destructive interference. Right. So when you see two wave fronts intersecting, you have this constructive and, well, as I was thinking about it today, right, this kind of absorption and emission simultaneously creates the symmetry of life, right? So it's almost like making symmetry and breaking symmetry in a cascade is what we experience as the flow of time, and also the creation of the past as we manifest the moment of time in these foci, or these dipole moments. And each of these moments now has its own frame of reference in the universe. And that's how we experience it, so to speak, by resonating with this new entity, this new moment, this new thought. And the thought has its own kind of time scale and its own gravity. And that's why our entire field that stores all our memories and emotions, we feel like we're dragging a field with us. We're dragging time. We're making time. You know, time is slipping away. We use all these kind of interesting poetic terms and, colloquialisms about, or sayings about time and space and on and on. But a lot of them, if you kind of add some physical attributions, make a lot more sense. Mick Kahn, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, Silent Murmur says solfeggio, right? I love F sharp. F sharp is great. Actually, it's so funny you say that, because I restrung my tiny acoustic guitar, and if it weren't 1 a.m. I would play it, but maybe next time. But I was playing E minor and singing in E minor, but then shifting to F minor, which is because you're kind of like E minor to F major is that, you know, that Phrygian kind of Spanish caravan kind of gypsy vibe. But E minor to F minor is a really interesting shift. So funny you say that, but also pertinent and serendipitous that you say that. I love B minor. Kronos says, it reminds me of ancient polygonal megalithic stonework. Well, because, you know, it's kind of like what I'm putting into play here is like a very specific way of looking at certain types of things. But I think are just human beings, just us drawing and us creating anything we do in these same shapes. So pretty much everything ubiquitously is this fundamental structure. Look at our letters of the alphabets. All the alphabets are geometric structures, either truncated platonics or circles or lines. And lines are made up of dots. If you've ever done 3D or Photoshop or anything like that, and you've drawn a line or a triangle, you see that lines are just experiences of a whole bunch of points in a row. Like a wake. Yeah, that's a good point. Biological meat suits. Well, meat suits inside an etheric plasma jello. Okay, so so this paint thing I have here, I feel like the teacher here. Should I erase the chalkboard? Should I erase this slide and move on? Let me hide the honeycomb. I know what I wanted to also add to this just before I got back to the moon. So the apple core, right? Let's talk about the apple core for a moment. And let me see how many steps of undo. Not as many as I would have liked, but I could probably still show you. So outline of the Birkeland filament, right? The butterfly's antennas right there. And then right here, you've got essentially a plasmoid, right? The densest point. And when it says dense, it just means extremely high energy. When things vibrate very fast, they harden. So as things get softer, they vibrate, I imagine, less. They vibrate less as they emanate outwards. So the field, this toroidal field around the apple, now it's slightly different shaped, but there it is. I mean, here's the cross section of the torus. You have the dielectric inertial plane, where matter is impinged in our galaxies and our solar systems. That's why we have like a flattened disk spiral right here. But let me simplify this for a second. I kind of want to reset it. Give me a moment. Okay, get back here. Okie dokie. So, Birkeland filament, Lichtenberg kind of patterns coming out here. Looks just like the lightning bolt. So, and let's talk about an apple and how interesting it really is. So this seed right here, this plasmoid, or this knot, really, it's a knot of energy. It's a knot of light. Let's say that's hard light. This hard light contains information that when you cut this in our reality, when you snip this off a tree, and you take it to another country, you can put this in the ground, this plasmoid, in Earth, and it will create a whole tree. Not an apple, but like the whole damn tree, like that can make other apples. Let's ponder more things, right? That to me, I just really never thought of things that way, but it's true. It's like an amazing, absolutely amazing thing that the information to grow another tree, and specifically the correct tree, is retained in this vibration, this oscillation, this knot, this plasmoid. The heart, right? It looks like a heart, right? Let's see. I'm going to keep going here, and I'll get back to the chat just so I don't like completely just jump back and forth. But anyway, so it has the information for an entire tree. It also has a relational quality between self, like heart, and other, all the flesh. Look at how much flesh to how much seed, right? The seed has all the information to make a tree, but the flesh is what makes the apple edible. The flesh is what's so inextricably tied to the whole and necessary, right? The masses, the sheeple, so to speak, the populace that doesn't get it, is the flesh. the necessitative flesh of the system. And then you have artists and musicians and politicians, right? I'm, you know, kind of going off on a thing here. I've said it before, but you tell me what you think. But to me, this kind of relational quality between the 80-20 or 90-10 or 95-5 or the 99%, just the concept itself comes from this relational quality as well that you find not only on the moon in atomic structures, but also very readily in fruit, where like there's a certain amount of seeds to a larger amount of flesh. You have a certain amount of matter, visible luminous matter in the universe versus a ton of dark matter or counter space. You have a few people on stage and you have 10,000 people in the audience. You have one chef and you have 50 patrons, right? There's always this relational quality of self and other. It can be described as self and other. It can be described as audience and performer. It can be described as matter and antimatter. But I think I see Kronos, you know, take it easy. Alan Watts said something like this: the big secret and the hardest thing to admit is that you are God hiding from yourself. Excellent way to head out for the night. I'd love to just unpack that and maybe I will at the end of the show, but thank you for saying it and have a good night. Really cool to have you hang out on the show with us tonight. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll dig your videos. I love Alan Watts's thing also, where he's like, the two reasons you don't know what you want: one, you have it. Two, you don't even know yourself. And he kind of starts to mumble, but I love the first part of it because the delivery is just, you know, legendary, where he's like, two reasons you don't know what you want: one, you have it. And there's this kind of silence that echoes through the hallowed halls of the philosophical chambers of our minds, where like he really just hits you hard, where like, of course you don't know what it is you want because you already have what you want, because you made you and you're the God and you did all this. You're it, as he would say. So I really love that. Let's see. Okay, so let's get back to this apple. So apple seed, relational size, scalar size of the heart of the apple, the plasmoid, and the field, the flesh, right? Relational quality culturally, relational quality geometrically, physically, on and on and on, but very much represented visually in an apple here. So then you have Lichtenberg, lightning patterns really just imprinted everywhere throughout. You have the outline of the Birkeland filament, the basic coaxial spiral. This is how the apple is fed and grown, because information in the form of the fractal recursive nature of our reality is, fed and also, is absorbed and emitted into this center. And so this is now self-aware. An apple is aware of its own existence. An apple ripens, or an apple gets eaten, and then we go here, and what's so cool is this almost exactly outlines the hypotrochoid, or the hourglass shape, or the hyperboloid, and you still have, of course, the Birkeland filament. But this here, the reason, this is a pinched plasma tube, is because of what I was talking about earlier, where you have resistance layers, and you also have attraction and repulsion. So right here is the bulge, the inverse bulge point, or counter space, impinging right on this plasmoid, which is radiating outwards, and the ether, the entire world, the universe, ether, is impinging upon this one point. And this point is creating interaction with the ether and growing and expanding. So let me quickly get back to this. So what else do we have? We have this pinch, because there are tubes. If you watch the Donald Scott Electric Stars, Birkeland filament, Hannes Alfvén stuff, you'll see that because this plasma this electricity or these electrical filaments are moving through, they're creating this kind of pinch over here, and that's why it's pinching the sheath. And essentially it's a cylinder surrounding Birkeland filaments, electric lightning cables, right? But then when things exist along these points, like these plasmoids, like an apple, and it creates the apple, it pinches this tube. That's my understanding of it at this point. I really feel like this is what makes sense across all scales. And of course, this is why you have compression rarefaction. So if you look at the sideways, it looks like a sine wave, or it looks like a square wave, or a saw wave. You also have DNA. You have the shape of mankind, essentially every chakra, right? Let me see. Let me jump into the chat because I feel like maybe I'm ignoring it too much. Gnostic Chef says, I agree, but spiritual is simply breathing. To be inspired is to be with breath. Yeah, because respiro, right? Spirit is really breath. The energy that animates the meat suits clearly is here for a reason. I just wonder if we have control of the outcome of our next step. Maybe it's just a job for the Godhead that need to be done. Well, after this, I'll get into maybe I'll close out tonight with the idea of the Godhead and how to prove it to yourself. And like yesterday I said it, but your eyeballs are a great way of looking at it. You made your own eyeballs, and you don't know how you did. And so therefore, like, we can all deny our godlike powers, but we have them. And then again, it ties to the Alan Watts thing where he's like, the reason you don't know what you have is because you already have it, because we already can make a human body, then grow a human body, and make art and speak, and we keep thinking there's more. There has to be more than this. But the thing is, the thing itself is already the thing. That's, I think, what the real answer is, right? You already have lifed yourself. You've given yourself the breath of life to be here as an aperture of the greater whole in order to have a fractured multidimensional experience of all sorts. Basically fulfill the entire gamut of experience by breaking yourself up, ourselves up into tiny fragments. Or our very experience individually is a fractal, like dewdrops on a spider's web. We're just looking at it from an angle, but in fact we're the larger whole. But I think physically it's much easier to just look at yourself in the mirror and realize that not only do you follow intrinsic geometry, but you yourself are the intrinsic geometry. We lifed ourselves. I swear, like the Earth peoples, we lifed. Because we got fed some energy through the Birkeland cables. We got plugged in. Adam's apple, atoms, atom, right? And a lot of people don't know that Adam in Arabic is bone. So Adam is really like much more bone than, but atom is dark, the darkness or the night. So let me know, again, chalkboard time, if this apple idea, there's a lot more, of course, but I think really relational quality of sizes, the fact that the seed can take the entire information of the tree and reseed it, and then the fact that literally the Birkeland filament is outlined by the very stem and the shape of the apple. There's almost no denying it because it's right there. It's like an imprint. So the kind of the cultural debunking of it is just so ridiculous to me. I find these people who tend to want to debunk it so silly because they're not doing science. They're just doing character assassination. If they presented anything novel, it would be one thing. But all this channel's dedicated to saying, no, there's no electricity, no way, ad hoc, crackpot. So ridiculous. Like especially the Stephen Crothers and Pierre-Marie Robitaille detractors. Those commenters are just, I want to say infuriating, but then I think this is the realm that we perceive where 90% of people are not probably going to understand it. Okay, I know what I was going to say. Thank you, myself, for reminding myself about this notion about what is it? The fact that there has to be this relational quality. It's not that the flesh cannot become seed and the seed cannot become flesh of the apple. You need both of them, right? Therefore, not everyone on earth can be enlightened, and not everyone can be good, and not everyone can be smart. And not because those people don't have are bad people or good people. It's just because the inherent structure, nature of reality denotates, it necessitates a structure of a bunch of people not getting it and a small group of people getting it. Now, which side of the fence you're on, which side of the Birkeland filament you're on, I don't know. But if you're here in this channel listening to me for 3 hours, I have a pretty good guess. But do you know what I'm saying here? Like, we have to have bad people, and we have to have wars and famine, and we have to have rotting apples in order for enlightenment and luminosity to exist. And you can say that as an ethical, philosophical idea, or you can look at an apple core, you can look at matter, antimatter, you can look at the human body and our field and realize there's a lot more flesh or field than point source. But we need both. And that's a beautiful concept, right? It almost, if you take it one step further, it's about acceptance of all. Of self and other, because of the necessitative quality of the othering of things. Hey, I see Cognition in the chat. Good to see you, friend. Good evening. Hope you, if you missed it, I've been talking a lot tonight, and I think I've done a pretty good job in outlining some of the larger concepts. This was a fun one tonight. I think. Let me know what you all think in the chat, but I feel like I really was articulated things maybe better than I have before, and also sketched a bunch of crap. So let me take a little break here because my neck is sore, so sore. My eyes are red. And we haven't seen the moon in a second, so let's bring the moon back into view. So yeah, moon craters, Mare Imbrium, Mare Serenitatis, pentagonal. It's pentagonal, it's not circular. And I just type in phys.org, type in NASA, type in Scott Manley, type in deep space, type in sky at night. Moon craters are circular. Everybody's circular. Why is everything so circular? I'm like, are you guys crazy? Am I just losing my mind? But no. The moon craters are hexagonal. Copernicus up there, that's dodecahedral, right? It's got 10, 12 sides. Tycho crater, bottom left corner. If we zoom into it, you'll see elongated hexagon, definitely a lot of erosion, but you can see it. Mare Crisium, bottom right. Serenity, Tranquility, pentagon against a hexagon. It's just clear. And there's just nobody talks about it, or at least the first thing they say, oh, you're an idiot. I'm like, okay, tinfoil, okay. But then tell me how you explain it otherwise. And then also tell me why these shapes exist, like I said, where it's circular first, then it expands, then you have a boundary layer, and it outlines fundamental geometry and the Birkeland. It's so coherent and holistic of an understanding of things that I share it with y'all in this very confident way, but for me, it's just so illuminating to be okay with the fact that we're God, okay with the fact that things are necessitatively contrast, right? Silence, the sound of silence, light of darkness, on and on and on. Things necessitatively contrast. And then we can look into space and understand how it's all happening. We get the matrix glasses in our lifetime. So I hope I didn't come across too arrogantly tonight or too I know everything type of thing, but shared some really bigger concepts that I've been wanting to share, and I'm going to do more of it. But yo, I see Discog, also Delurkin. Excellent mind food. Thank you, friend. I see Vicky. What's going on? I'm lurking. Hey, hey. Good deal. All right. So yeah, the necessitative quality, the acceptance. We got, what else was I talking about? Yeah, so when I finish the video, I'm going to link to that artist dyslexic theory of everything. I love that cat, actually, and I kind of, every time I say frame of reference, I think of him. So I will link that channel. And yeah, time for a little break then. Keeping it old school. And also let me know if you have any song requests here. Boxes and boxes, your infinite toxins, all got something to say. Indestructible ideas are vanishing. leg of the journey. Maybe we've got another 30 minutes here. I'm gonna play another song, but I also just let you know what I'm doing. We got about 30 minutes with the moon before she sets. I want to go and zoom a bit on Mare Crisium and Proclus, and I also want to take a look up again at Sinus Iridum, and yeah, just a couple of quick close-up shots. Maybe I'll get rid of the focal reducer and really do some zoomed-in shots before it's completely set. And then I want to check out and see if I can find some Saturn for us. And yeah, we'll do a little bit more, just because I got a lot of energy right now. I feel like just floating off the ground a little bit. Shout out to all the kitties in the house. Throw them paws up.
So long for you, I've been singing about the So long for you, I've been dreaming about the one with you, I've been singing about this dream. So long for you, till I see the color of your eyes reflected in the missing picture I made for you. Oh Lord, if you know what brings it, and you know what soul can sing to me. But you know what brings it, and you know what soul can. We gotta go, oh, it's what brings it out, and you know what soul can. Got us electric love, what brings it out, and you know what soul can.
Alright, back on it. Thanks for all the love about the music, y'all. NGC, I know you're just like the coolest fan, one of the coolest fans. I know all of you are fans, but NGC, like, you hit up my Bandcamp page, and kind of, I always think about, like, man, I should be posting more and uploading everything, but you actually did inspire me to put the lyrics up there on the Bandcamp page, so I think I did for Electric Blood, right? Hope I did. But anyway, thank you all for the appreciation. So we got, also, that's one of my favorite songs. It's like, it's got to really be remastered, but I don't know, just there's this moment where I kind of wrote it like in a single session, and I don't know, it really resonates with me. So, okay, Mare Crisium in view. We got the two little craterlets. That's Pierce and Picard underneath it. And the moon is actually setting quite quickly, so that's why it's getting a little fringy and a little bit wavy. But you can see some really killer detail around Mare Crisium. You can see Proclus, which is the bright white crater in that point. And Proclus is really where I think the apple seed would be, right? That's the knot. That's the folded nexus of one of these particular instantiations of the dipole, right? And of course, as I'm talking, the clouds are like just like, shut up. We know. Plasma. But anyway, Proclus looks great. Moon is setting. Let's get back to the tunes then. And I'm going to check out and see if I can find us some Saturn to close up the night. Kronos. Let's do some dream fields up in here. Same week that I wrote Electric Blood.
Sleepless peace on and on. My dreams are made to feel so tiny. Sleepless peace on and on. My fields are made to dream so high and on. Sleepless peace on and on. My dreams are made to feel so tiny. Sleepless peace on and on. My fields are made to dream so high. At the corner of your bed, I see another crime revealed. What do you think is real? And how you think you see this silhouette redeemed until the moon is all of me. We raced against the bus and let time drift off of me. And so you know it's real. I cut you probably not find a rest in I made a dream so high and sleepless peace. My dreams I made her feel so tiny. Sleepless peace. Dreams I made a dream so high and I see you and me together wrapped around my head instead. I felt you on the surface of the moon. They said I'm dead until you know my dream as none of us will always be waiting for them to wake up eternally. Let's get pushing on up this burn. Sleepless peace. My dreams I made her feel so tiny. Sleepless peace. My guilt I made her dream so high. Sleepless peace. My dreams I made her feel so tiny. Sleepless peace. I walked into myself in a dream, I tell you. Locked doors, no flaws in this fantasy. In this life, cause everything's been for your pleasure. You found your home, you found your soul, you found your treasure. When you play your mind, your face, the needlessness to it's the love of the age. No story to say, just a corner of your page. On top of the wave, I found the love, I found the sage. I'm coming to say, no, it is your way. I feel so hot.
friends. The tiredness just hit me all at once, so I'm so glad I got that all in, and Saturn too. Saturn's looking quite small but gorgeous. Really interesting angle on it. You can definitely see the middle band, and you can see the separation of the C-ring. But yeah, not as big as previously. Remember us seeing it on the last cycle, so high up there, maybe 55, 60 degrees up, and looking kind of faint. But still, we got Saturn, which is just absolutely incredible. The fact that we manifest every instantiation of the dipole while we resonate with Saturn is not lost on me, and I'll share that with you. And I drew a little bit, just quickly sketched the Birkeland filament, which goes through the center and powers the counter-rotating currents of Saturn and all planets and Jupiter and the human body, but mostly like that the hexagonal formation at the poles. There are counter-rotating currents, and shout-outs to Donald Scott and the electric star model and the idea of the fact that you have this coaxial filament twisting, creating these different counter-rotating nested currents. So, and then hexagons, we talked about them being inherently electrical and organic, and because of boundary layers, right? Spherical in nature is expand into boundaries, but also just the beauty of the moment and the tunage. So I'm going to call it 1:44 a.m. Thank you so much, everybody. Saw so many awesome people here tonight. Regulars, new people, and people I haven't seen in a long time. So thanks. Auntie Queenie, nice to see you in here. And anybody I missed, and anybody checking this out tomorrow, please share. Please leave me a comment. And if there's a comment, like you have an opinion, please try and leave me some detail or something I can actually respond to. I don't mean to disappoint, and again, not trying to sell anything, no ego trip here, just in a way I feel like obligated to share the views and share these ideas with y'all for a small community. Do I get an ego trip out of the songs? Sure, why not? But like, I enjoy that with everyone. Thank you so much. I'm inspired, of course, by y'all. That's why I write all this stuff, too. So it's like inextricably tied. It's necessitative, if you will. All right. Letting this drift off here with one more tune. What's the tune? I don't know. Like, let's see if y'all can guess what I'm going to play. That's probably not something. Maybe something different. I don't know how this. All right, operator, signing off for the night. I'll catch y'all on the next stream, everybody. Thanks again. Peace out. Just get near it. Our inner voices just leave.